Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. Today, we've got another Quasar Commander video right from my Patreon, and like the last one, the idea of covering an archetype has gone right out the window. Heck, we aren't even talking about a loosely conjoined series of monsters this time. In fact, there won't even be any monsters, at least at first. But give these cards time, and they'll sneak up on you when you least expect it. Embodiment of Apophis, first released in the TCG as an event promo for the Cybernetic Revolution sneak peek, and ever since, continuous trapped card monsters have added a terrifying new angle to dueling. Why summon your monsters to the field, only for them to be run over in battle or become subject to monster removal, when you could instead have them hide away in your back row, ready to spring from the shadows and strike at a moment's notice. Granted, this never really caught on, neither as a core strategy and very rarely as supplemental text. But it's a piece of design that has surfaced time and time again over the years, most notably in the recently announced Argo Stars archetype coming out in Supreme Darkness. Now, that archetype will get its time soon enough, but now it's time we paid homage to one of Yu-Gi-Oh's most creative, insidious, and outrageous design decisions with continuous trap monsters explained. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. Trap card monsters come in all shapes and sizes, so before we get into the meat of things, let's make sure we set up some ground rules about what we're not talking about. First up, normal trap cards that become monsters are off the list. Those work on a pretty different axis than the continuous trap card monsters most of the time, most of them not even counting as trap cards while being monsters, which is pretty wild. And honestly, most of those are Paleozoics, and those already have their own video, so just go give that a watch. And speaking of other archetypes, we're going to be talking about free agent cards here. Mostly. Some archetype adjacent cards might show up here and there, but if the card has an archetype name anywhere on it, we're leaving it behind. And if it's even suggested to work with an established theme, it's on thin ice. As for what they are, we'll see in all of the effect text for continuous trap card monsters a stat line denoting all the things you'd expect from a regular old monster, which I'll be reading out like I would for monsters normally in videos, as well as a little parenthetical saying that they are still treated as trap cards. This means that they are vulnerable to all things that affect monsters and trap cards, meaning Mystical Space Typhoon just became monster removal. It's a bit rough, but as removal gets better, it's able to remove cards in general, instead of only having a specific target, so it's not that much of a downside in the modern era. This does lead to some funny interactions where, if flipped face down, they actually get put back in the spell and trap zone so they can be activated again. Though that does count as setting them, so you'll have to wait a turn before you can activate them to flip them up. They also no longer take up spaces in your spell and trap zone while acting as monsters. That's something they used to do before recent rule change. This allows you to set more cards once they've been summoned, so you're not at a deficit of being able to back up your monsters with spell and trap support. But just make sure you don't set too many cards back there, because if your trap card monsters get flipped face down, well, they're not going to have anywhere to go once they become set spells and traps, and will have to go to the graveyard. Alright, that's about it for the preamble, and now it's time to talk about some cards. First up is Abyss Stingray, a level 5 Light Thunder monster with 1900 attack and 0 defense, and is special summoned as an effect monster. If summoned this way, it can't be destroyed by battle. Now, the level could have been whatever and wouldn't really affect the playability, but the attack stat is pretty nice, and being immune to battle destruction makes this a great blocker against anything that doesn't have piercing. And because it's level 5, it makes for great synchro and exceeds material. But it is pretty strange that the name implies that this card is a has-been. It doesn't sting anymore, but it has stung. Which then begs the question of what it actually attacks with then. Slamming into people with that giant indestructible body? Seems awkward. Angel Statue Azuroon is a level 4 Light Fairy monster with 1800 attack and defense, and is special summoned as an effect monster. Once per turn, when your opponent would special summon any number of monsters while this card is in your monster zone, you can send it to the grave a continuous trap card in your monster zone that was special summoned there from the spell and trap zone to negate the summon, and if you do, destroy those monsters. And when this card in the monster zone is destroyed by battle, you can destroy the monster that destroyed this card. This is just overall a fantastic trap card. Flip it over during your opponent's draw phase and dare them to perform any kind of inherent summon, or use some other kind of removal to bypass this. And if that chosen form of removal is by battle, then they lose the attacking monster as well. And with an 1800 stat both ways, they won't be giving up any tiny chumps to do that. But I'd take care not to look at it for too long. I have watched way too much Doctor Who to not be wary around this kind of stuff. Apophis the Swamp Deity is a level 6 Earth Reptile monster with 2000 attack and 2200 defense that you can activate during any main phase to special summon it as a normal monster. Then, you can negate the effects of face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of other continuous trap cards you control until the end of this turn. This is an update to the original embodiment of Apophis, which itself is a level 4 Earth Reptile monster with 1600 attack and 1800 defense, also summoned during the main phase and also as a normal monster. Swamp Deity ups the ante by adding some negation to the kit, rewarding you for accumulating other continuous trap cards, though not necessarily in their monster form. This is going to kick all kinds of butt in Argo Stars once they come out, but for now, it's a nice little tech pick that gives you some much needed interaction in a continuous trap card pile. Remember, this negates the effects of face-up cards, so this is even good at stopping cards like Infinite Impermanence and Raigeki. It's also, fun fact, distant cousin of Vanaminaga. It's a small swamp out there after all. Copy Knight is weird because it can only be activated when a level 4 or lower warrior is normal summoned to your field, and it becomes a normal light warrior with 0 attack and defense, mimicking the name and level of what you normal summoned, making it more Xyz support for a warrior deck instead of being a good piece of continuous trap card pile support. So, obligatory Copy Knight mention is out of the way here. I kind of feel like this is coming in from a Shovel Knight script, but now what can you do? Cyber Shadow Garden is a level 4 Earth Machine monster with question mark attack and defense, and during your opponent's main phase, you can special summon this card as an effect monster. And when an opponent's monster declares an attack that targets this card's attack and defense become equal to the attacking monster's attack and defense. And once per turn, during your opponent's end phase, you have to set this card in your spell and trap zone. So we've seen this before in our breakdown of all the cyber cards, where I also mentioned that this card doesn't really fit into anything cyber cards want to do, so it's clear to join in this video. But it's still not good. It can hardly even act as material for a summon, and its defensive capabilities are so telegraphed that they borderline on pointless. Even as a tech card, this does not make the cut, but hey, once we get to Gardena explained, I'm sure things will look up. Third time's the charm after all. Dimension Reflector is a level 4 Dark Spellcaster monster with question mark attack and defense, and you can activate it by banishing 2 monsters that you control, then targeting a face-up monster that your opponent controls. This gets special summoned in attack position as an effect monster, with the attack and defense equaling that face-up monster's attack. And if this monster is summoned this way, you burn your opponent for damage equal to this card's attack. This is a sneaky little way of closing out games. If your opponent summons anything with an attack higher than their life points and you have the monsters to spare, this is a great way to preemptively magic cylinder them for their life savings. And on top of that, it's gonna have the same attack as the amount of burn damage that you just did. So if your opponent has an additional smaller monster that you can run over, you can close out the rest of the game via battle damage. The problem is, well, you need 2 monsters to use for this and a worthwhile monster on your opponent's field to mimic. And one without targeting protection to boot, that's gonna be rough. This could easily see play if it even took 1 less monster to activate, but as it stands now, this mirror just isn't a good match for anything. Dwimmered Glimmer is a light spellcaster monster with 0 attack and defense that you can activate by banishing a face-up monster you control or a monster in your grave to special summon this as a normal monster with the same level as the banished monster. This is another solid card you can use to supplement anything that cares about levels. It's perfect for any deck looking to pump out Xyz monsters, but can also help with synchros in a pinch. And if you need ways to banish monsters to fire up your engine, this is a quick way to do so. I'm looking at you, Metaphys! Look, if any deck could use the help, it's that one. Crystal Avatar is a level 4 light warrior monster with question mark attack and 0 defense, and when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack If its attack is greater than or equal to your life points, you special summon this card in attack position as an effect monster that has attack equal to your life points, then change the attack target to this card. If this card summoned this way is destroyed by battle after damage calculation, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its attack. Now, this won't help much if the attacking monster has double your life points in attack, but anything less than that and Avatar can help ensure you don't die outright while dealing a bit of reflection damage, which is very funny if you manage to win the game off that bit of chip. That being said, it's another very situational monster that doesn't have a lot of broad synergies, only being useful on death's door. I mean, there are anime effects, but there's nothing quite like the Dark Side of Dimensions movie anime effects. They were just doing whatever they wanted. Kuebiko is a level 2 Earth Fairy monster with 0 attack and defense that can be special summoned as an effect monster with the following effect. Once per chain, when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field that targets any number of cards you control, as a quick effect, you can set this card in your spell and trap zone, and if you do, negate that opponent's effect. Then, if that monster has the highest attack on your opponent's field, return it to the hand. So, it's a little monster that wards off targeted monster effects, though only those that activate on the field, and if it squares up against the biggest monster, it also bounces. It's kinda nifty, but I feel like it's so narrow that you're only ever going to use this in a sealed environment. Not to mention that this thing falls over in the face of a stiff breeze. Now, if the conditions are right and there are a ton of monsters on the board targeting your stuff, then sure, this is gonna sell like hotcakes, but aside from that, I'd go get that cool hat and poncho before it gets trampled over by a monster so you can save something from this card. Machine King 3000 BC is a level 4 Earth Machine monster with 1000 attack and defense that you can special summon as an effect monster. If summoned this way, once per turn, during your main phase, you contribute a machine monster to grant this card an attack boost equal to the attack of the tributed monster that it had on the field until the end of the turn, and you can't normal or special summon other monsters the turn you activate this card. That's a super harsh downside for a card that's so mid. Now, if you are set on playing this card, do your best to activate it during your opponent's turn so it's not conflicting with your regular normal summon or your other special summons, as that's the one that will trigger the no summon lock. But even then, only don't do that if you don't have any other cards to summon during your opponent's turn. Honestly, I'm not really sure what the target audience for this card is, other than some kind of big machine beatdown, but to do that with any level of efficiency, you'll have to get this guy out of his big chair, and remember, this is from the year 3000 BC. I'm not sure if functioning hydraulics were a part of the design specs at the time. Metal Reflect Slime is a level 10 Water Aqua monster with 0 attack and 3000 defense that can be special summoned in defense position as an effect monster, and if summoned this way, it can't attack. Not sure what the effect is other than not being able to attack, but aside from that, why would you even want to? This has a special place in decks running Egyptian God Slime, as you can just immediately tag this out for that big fusion monstrosity, but as a level 10 monster, remember, that's pretty good for Xyz summons. Making Gustav Max partially out of living goo just seems too funny to me to pass up. Metamorph Fortress is a level 4 Earth Rock monster with 1000 attack and defense that's summoned as an effect monster, and can be activated by targeting a level 4 or lower monster that you control, special summoning this card. Then, you equip that face-up monster targeted by Metamorph Fortress to it as an equip card. If summoned this way, this card gains attack and defense equal to the attack of the monster equipped to it by this effect. Also, if this card attacks, change it to defense position at the end of the battle phase. Now, this is reminiscent of cards like Stronghold the Moving Fortress, a big chunk of continuous trap cards that work with gadgets, but like I said, we aren't even close to talking about those. Don't worry, Yugi explained, I'm sure 100,000 subscribers is just around the corner. However, Metamorph Fortress works with any level 4 or lower monster that you control, so you could slot this into a lot of different decks. It's a cool way to convert a normal summon that otherwise doesn't have a purpose after the initial summon into a bigger creature. And if it had a decent attack stat, even the fact that it goes to defense position after it battles isn't that bad, because it takes the attack of the base monster and applies it to both the attack and the defense. A great application for this is cards like Goblin Attack Force. You can go in with your big 2300 attack normal summon, activate Metamorph Fortress, create a 3300 attack monster to go in again, and then switch to defense with a 3300 point butt. It's just like having Guardian Chimera again. But I think we've yet to unlock the true potential of this card. Turning to defense position every turn, I think we just found our new hot tech for clown control. It's about time Dream Clown got its time in the spotlight again. Mimesis Elephant is a level 2 Earth Beast monster with 0 attack and 2000 defense that you can special summon as an effect monster. If this card is in the monster zone, as a quick effect, you can declare a type and attribute, then target a face-up monster on the field, and it becomes that type and attribute until the end of the turn. So we have a pachyderm with a big butt that's here to give a little nudge to monster type and attribute combos, and you can use this on your and your opponent's monsters. This can ruin any particular setups your opponent is trying to develop if they require specific types and attributes, so it's a great troll option, but is also usable on your own if we need any specific combinations to advance to the next part of our plan, making this quite literally the elephant in the room. And as it turns out, that is not the only animal-based continuous trap card that's going to be messing with types and attributes. Quantum Cat is a level 4 monster with 0 attack and 2200 defense, and when activated, you declare a monster type and attribute. When it resolves, this card is special summoned as a normal monster with the chosen type and attribute. Now, this card has an interesting history. You might have gleaned from the art and its shifting nature that it's a reference to the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment, where Quantum Cat can be any combination of types and attributes until you bring it into the observable realm and the wave function collapses, leaving only the card of your choice. But it was also one of several new release cards found in the Battle Pack 3 Monster League set. A rather strange set to include this card in, considering the special rule of that was that all monsters counted as all types, making part of its effect pretty redundant, but does give you access to basically any level 4 monster you need outside that format to help with extra deck summons. It also released alongside another largely identical monster, Swamp Mirrorer, which works pretty much the same way, but has 1800 attack and 1000 defense instead, making it the offense to Cat's defense, which, you know, is the classic counterpart, a higher leveled being whose form shall be unknown to us beyond this mortal plane, and a universal movie monster. Grab a couple vampires and you basically just remade Hellsing. Shape Sister is a level 2 Earth Fiend tuner monster with 0 attack and defense, that's special summoned as a normal monster. Yup, no special effects, but we've added tuners into the mix, expanding our extra deck options. And we already have some great levels to pair with it. Stingray in this makes Black Rose Dragon, and when combined with Metal Reflect Slime, you've got all manner of level 12 synchros to choose from. And it's not our only tuner, we've also got Space Dragster, a level 1 Fire Machine tuner monster with 0 attack and 1800 defense that's summoned as an effect monster. If summoned this way, other tuners you control cannot be destroyed by battle or your opponent's card effects while this card is in the monster zone. So it has some nice utility with other tuners to keep them safe, and gets even better if you can summon 2 Space Dragsters, as they will protect each other, warding off any kind of attack or removal. Being level 1 is a bit rough compared to 2, but there are still plenty of great synchros to work with to make these 2 cards a worthwhile investment. But I mean, there really is no consistency on what makes a tuner, right? One's a pile of liquid metal mimic, and the other is an anthropomorphic car. You know, the 2 classic genders. Silo Hat Trick is a level 4 Dark Illusion monster with 1500 attack and 600 defense with the following effects. If this card is special summoned, you can target face-up cards your opponent controls, up to the number of illusion monsters you control, and negate their effects until the end of the turn. And second, if this card battles a monster, neither can be destroyed by that battle, a, classic illusion monster effect. Now, that first part sounds a lot like Swamp Deity Apophis, but it's not quite power crept yet. That's because Silo Hat Trick is a negate that triggers after being special summoned, while the Apophis negate is part of the summon, meaning that Apophis can actually chain to cards and negate them, while Trick will always be 1 chain late to react to anything on demand. That being said, it's still a fantastic card because it doesn't need any other support to work. As an illusion monster itself, you get at least 1 negate for the turn, and that might be enough, especially because this can also hit any face-up card, not just monsters. But if I just left it at that, I'd only be telling half the story, because this card is linked to a Link monster that you can see in the art itself, Silo Hat Rabbit, a Link to Light illusion monster with 1500 attack, requiring 2 effect monsters as material. Like most illusions, if this card battles, neither monster can be destroyed by that battle, and if this card is link summoned, you can set a continuous trap card from your deck with an effect that special summons itself as a monster. Also, this card can't be used as link material this turn. And if a card in the spell and trap zone is special summoned to the monster zone except during the damage step, you can target a spell or trap card your opponent controls and destroy it. So linking for this gets you Silo Hat Trick, which will get 2 negates now because you have 2 illusions, and then Rabbit will trigger to pop a back row. No wonder this card is so popular, it's got a wild amount of utility all by itself. But it gets even better when we use it, because instead of Hat Trick, we can instead opt to set any continuous trap card monster. The entire lineup is at our fingertips, and any pure version of the deck is going to count on this to coordinate their plays. Just be careful about what you choose to use as material. It does specifically say it uses effect monsters, and a lot of our monsters special summon themselves as normal monsters, so make sure you keep a few Link Spiders in the extra deck to smooth things out. With proper prep work, you'll be able to use these 2 to pull victory out of a hat on command. Statue of Anguish Pattern is a level 7 Earth Rock monster with 0 attack and 2500 defense, and is special summoned as an effect monster. If summoned this way, this card can't be targeted by an opponent's card effect while you control another trap card that's a monster. And if a card is special summoned from your spell and trap zone to the monster zone while this card is a monster, you can target a card on the field and destroy it. This is not once per turn, so if you field this first before deploying your other trap card monsters, you've got a little extra bit of removal. Especially if you combine this with Silo Hat Rabbit's spell and trap removal, which itself is a hard once per turn, but stacking all that is still pretty sweet. Combined with the targeting protection you get while other trap card monsters are in play, and you've got what I would regard as the boss monster of the trap card monster lineup. Proper usage of this will give you all the tools you need to conquer the competition, spreading all the anguish that you could ever muster. I mean, just look at this thing. Even without any facial expressions, we've got that little head tilt that tells you they're enjoying all the suffering they're inflicting. Tiki Curse is a level 4 Dark Rock monster with 1800 attack and 1000 defense, and is special summoned as an effect monster. And while this card is an effect monster, if another trap card that is a monster battles an opponent's monster after damage calculation, destroy that opponent's monster. Now the cool thing is that works with any trap card monster, so congratulations Paleozoic, we do have some overlap. Turning any of our other trap card monsters into 1-for-1 trades gives you some removal, but it's not really the best trade. Our monsters are a bit harder to bring back to the field than normal ones, but thankfully, this card combos very well with our next one, Tiki Soul, a level 4 light rock monster with 1000 attack and 1800 defense. And while this card is an effect monster, if another trap card that you control that's a monster would be destroyed by your opponent's card, either by battle or card effect and sent to the grave, you can set it in the spell and trap card zone instead. So not only does removal not work as well against your other trap card monsters, they trade very well using Tiki Curse's effect now. Blow them up with Curse, set your monster with Soul if they lose the battle, and then you can reactivate them later. This can even get you extra uses out of monsters like Swamp Deity Apophis for more negation. These 2 are a powerhouse all their own and fit snugly into any continuous trap card theme to bolster their power, so be sure to find a way to give these Tikis some room. You're Finished is a level 10 Dark Cyberse monster with 3000 attack and defense that's special summoned as an effect monster, but only if 10 or more cards and or effects have been activated during that turn, but it's set in your spell and trap zone during the end phase. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a card or effect while this card is in your monster zone as a quick effect, you can destroy as many cards your opponent controls as possible, then set this card in your spell and trap zone. So when this card says you're finished, it means you better be finished with taking any game actions outside of attacking, because the second you do and this Sukeban is on the field, all their cards are toast. It's kind of like Nibiru, but for playing cards, not just summoning monsters. You ever get angry at your opponent for taking 20-minute turns? This is a pretty quick way to solve that. But the cool part is, even though your opponent has to trigger the board wipe effect to summon this, it checks for all card and effect activations, even your own. So you're not entirely dependent on your opponent to make this live. Heck, if it's set on the field long enough, you could be the one bringing it to the field and then punishing your opponent for activating another effect on top of it, which is kinda messed up. 10 sounds like an intimidating number, but in today's modern environment, I think that's pretty tame, so you can get a lot of value out of this, especially if you're playing a deck like ours that can gain access to this at the drop of a Silo hat. Just don't waste your time after activating. This gal has somewhere to be, namely back on her phone so she can get back on Twitter. This lady is a chronic poster. Zoma, the Earthbound Spirit, is a level 4 dark zombie monster with 1800 attack and 500 defense that's special summoned as an effect monster with the following effect. All monsters your opponent controls that can attack must attack this card. If this card summoned by its own effect is destroyed by an opponent's monster attack, inflict damage to your opponent up to a maximum of 3000, equal to double the original attack of the attacking monster. And because that opposing monster is going to need at least 1850 attack to run over this, hitting that 3k cap is going to be pretty simple. This is a retrain of an older card, Zoma the Spirit, which has the same stats and is special summoned as an effect monster in defense position. And if this card summoned this way is destroyed by battle, you burn your opponent for damage equal to the attack of the monster that destroyed it. Now, because it only has 500 defense, and it has to be summoned in defense position, if you leave it up to your opponent, they're just going to run this over with as small a monster as possible. But nothing stopping you from summoning this during your opponent's end phase, changing it to attack on your turn, then running it into your opponent's biggest monster. A trick that the newer variant can't do because it has to be destroyed specifically by an opponent's monster's attack, not just by battle. The newer Earthbound variant crams in Bakura references left and right. Zoma is one of his cards, and Call of the Earthbound is a trap card that he would use to direct attacks, specifically to Zoma, so you can see where the attack forcing effect comes in. The damage cap is a little stranger, but is a reference to how much damage Zoma inflicted in the manga, very cute. Both of these are really slick, with the Earthbound being able to draw attacks away from your other monsters, comboing super well with cards like Tiki Soul and Curse. Regular Zoma, on the other hand, has no damage cap, so the potential for damage is huge. Though in practice it's not much more impactful than the new version, so I'd stick to the retrain if you need to make some cuts. Oh, but don't cut it too hard, you're not the one who's supposed to be taking that damage here. Alright, that's all of the continuous trap card monsters, but what do we do with them? Well, it's not anything fancy really. The fact that we're playing with a bunch of pink cards means that we've got to play the grind game. That's right, no instant gratification for us. We've got to hunker down and control the board while our quote-unquote monsters take the field, slowly but surely. So we'll want to smash in as much continuous trap card support as we can from whatever sources we can manage, and maybe supplement that with the game's most hated card type, Floodgates. But it's not my fault most of them look exactly like the ones in our monster lineup, so what can we play to help them out? Well, the first one is probably the most obvious, and while I find it to be incredibly silly, it's also too tempting not to use. Uriah, Lord of Searing Flames. The potential attack on this card is immense, with its own summoning putting it up to the size of a Blue Eyes White Dragon, and future summons being even more massive. The unrespondable back row removal is a nice bonus, but what I really like is the addition of Hyper Blaze. Not only does it make properly summoning this card a tad easier, once you do summon it properly, Hyper Blaze can bring it back from the graveyard for only a single discard. So you can keep bringing back your Juggernaut over and over again to keep threatening lethal. It's kind of the Yu-Gi-Oh equivalent of announcing check in chess every turn. Cardon the Clear-Sighted is a pretty swanky monster. Normal summoning it gets you a continuous trap card from your hand or grave and puts it onto the field and lets you activate it that turn, actually letting you utilize your continuous trap cards immediately. Then, once you can get this in the graveyard, you get protection for all of your trap cards all the way through to your next turn. This is basically a staple, and you should play 3 of these easy. There was also some sweet TCG exclusives that work with trap cards summoning monsters. Not necessarily trap card monsters themselves, these will still trigger in response to cards like Welcome Labyrinth, but it works with basically all of our cards. Magicaloidal Soul summons to the field from the hand or grave if a monster is summoned by the effect of a trap card, and lets you perform a quick sync or Xyz summon during your opponent's battle phase. The Xyz summon half works better for Paleozoic since all of them are level 2 monsters, but we work best with the Synchro portion. We've already talked about how good Shapesister is. Now we have a way to do that in monster form. Volmina, Statue of the Sacred Dragon, is a strange one because it is both a monster and a spell, but not a trap card, but helps us out all the same. Basically, as a pendulum spell, if you special summon a monster via a trap card, you get to compulse a monster while summoning Volmina from the pendulum zone. And as a monster, if an opponent attacks, you get to bounce that monster and put Volmina back in the pendulum zone, giving you a continual loop of bouncing, which adds to the wealth of removal we get from other cards. That's 10 was made specifically to complement your finished, but can once again technically work with our entire loadout of continuous trap monsters, especially if we aren't likely to hit that 10 activation threshold to summon out the lady with the bad attitude. And a blanket attack boost like that isn't too bad either. Springing out 2 or 3 monsters out of nowhere with a 5 or even 600 point boost can do a lot to swing a game in your favor. Now, I know what y'all are thinking. Nova, are you gonna mention Imperial Custom in this video about continuous trap cards? No. Begone Knave is a... No, okay, put the comments down, While this card protects continuous trap cards in general, it specifically lists that it keeps them safe from battle destruction as well, so they knew what they were doing when they were printing this. Imperial Custom also helps keep your floodgates safe, but so I said I would talk about floodgates, but as it turns out, there aren't really any good ones that work with us. Summon Limit was probably the one that best worked with us since we can summon pretty easily during both turns, but that card's banned. We have such a wide variety of monster types and attributes that Rivalry of Warlords and a Gozen match aren't very good, and if we go into There Can Be Only One, well then we won't be able to use Tiki Curse, Soul, and Anguish pattern together. So the only floodgate that could be used asymmetrically is Dimensional Fissure. None of our monsters will get banished because they're actually trap cards, but it's a spell card, so it has no overlap with Imperial Custom. Anti-Spell Fragrance might be good to combat opposing spell cards, but at 1, it's not likely to come up a lot. Not that any of that's a problem, the less of these cards that are around, the better. In fact, it's our non-floodgate continuous trap cards that give us the best bang for our buck. Begone Knave's downside for us means less when we can just reset and summon our monsters back on a following turn. Meanwhile, our opponent might find it a little more difficult to rebuild their board, especially if they invested heavily into extra deck monsters, forcing them to only swing in when they have guaranteed lethal. Beast King Unleashed is also pretty slick. Because you can summon your monsters at just the right moment to whatever column you need, you can just slap it onto a column with an opposing monster to get the big bounce. And like with Knave, we'll be able to redeploy quicker than our opponent, and in a way that lets us continually rearrange our monsters in certain columns to make the best use out of this card. Booby Trap E is kind of like our version of Monster Reborn, or maybe Call of the Haunted, letting us set a continuous trap card from our hand or grave to the field, then allowing us to activate it during that same turn. You can even do that sweet trick where you discard a continuous trap card that you want to set, as long as you have a legit target to get the ball rolling in the first place, which is always fun. And if you end up running any monsters that could be summoned with Call of the Haunted, Booby Trap E works with that as well. And what theme would be complete without an archetypal draw 2 spell? Well, I'm sure the all trap card deck would be okay with it, but currently we've got Magic Planter. Send a continuous trap card to the graveyard and draw 2. So if you need to dig deeper or just want to make room for more monsters to summon, this lets you do so while maintaining your card advantage. As for a silly tech pick, we've got Guardian Iatos. Hard to have any monsters in your graveyard if you don't play any at all. I mean, it's probably still advised that you run cards like hand traps to stifle your opponent, which would keep you from using this card, and we don't have any equip spells to make full use of it. Okay, that was a first draft. Let's go back to the drawing board. Instead, let's play Book of Eclipse. It plays with how continuous trap monsters work in a funny way while shutting down opponent's monsters for a turn. The issue is that because our monsters are set by this, we can't just bring them back out immediately. We do have to wait a turn to activate them. This means we won't be able to take immediate action, leaving our opponent with a chance to get some sick draws when their monsters flip up. However, it does allow us to turn off the monster status of our trap cards so that they become unaffected by monster-specific interactions, and that's kinda neat. And that's all I have to say about the continuous trap card monster roster. While I don't think we'll be seeing the end of this particular design decision anytime soon, Argo Stars is definitely going to introduce a new paradigm, paving the way for an all-new style that I think is going to go a long way towards making this a more legitimate strategy. And with all these cards at their fingertips, they already have a really stacked toolbox to pull from. I look forward to covering them in the future, but for now, I'm happy we got to see how the mechanic has grown and evolved over the years, watching design decisions get experimented with before seeing if they succeeded into a new era or failed to leave a lasting impression. It really is a fascinating, continuous continuity. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Which continuous trap card monster is your favorite, and if you could design one, what would you have it do? Let me know your thoughts down below, and if you haven't already, please be sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode is brought to you by Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and get 5% off your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. It was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders, Upstairs Media, and the Wizard Moose, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, 50 Gigabits, Ada Basilisk, Adams Ajdel, Oexo Toahime, Anansi Dragon, Ancient Wizard, Andrew Newman, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Comrade Copperbottom, Eric, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Hair Bear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Leo 458, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Megacombi, Millennia Asta, Mern, Muse Clark, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Pat Poos, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Serenity Towns, The Critic of Innocence and Thievery Coast, Cosmic Crusaders Andrew J. Whitaker, Ariel Kersey, Bedin Von Titty Sprinkles, Beelzephyr, Beluga Masta, Blitzwolf, Chaz Ghost, Dr. Reaper R.I.P., Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Ignis Heat the True Draco Slayer, Inblink, Kale the Dragon, Kevon Public, Lobamaru 02, Manga Pages, Matt Simmons, McSpoofy, Michael Shimobukuro, Nitromo, Nyx, Obsidian, Shizuka Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, The Legendary Raven, The Phantom Knights of Shitted Pants, The Pokemon 52, Tiger X2476, Weasel King of Weaseltown, and Zaldreka, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you'd check out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you'd like to see another video about a group of cards held together by one defining feature and nothing else, check out this video where I cover all the loose Archfiend cards in the game. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. This can even get you extra uses out of monsters like Swamp Entity Apophis for Swamp Entity, Swamp Deity, you fool.